So, hello and welcome back yet again to Around the World in 80 Days, where I don't think it might have taken me 80 days to read it. I don't know, I'd have to look back and see when I started this book, but Around the World in a month and a half or so, that's less than 80 days. Christine is very good at math. Not really. Anyway, I hope you guys are all doing good, and I hope you are all surviving the deep freeze if you live anywhere west of the Rockies and north of mid Florida in the United States, because it's cold. Oh my gosh. It's not snowing today, though, so huzzah for that. Um, it's not exactly blue skies, but it's at least bright gray. I will take bright gray. You're so done with the bleak weather. I do have exciting news. It looks like we are going to be finishing this week, so I will announce our three choices for our next book on probably Thursday. When we finish this up, I'll announce it, and then we'll vote over the weekend and start the new book on next Monday, if everything goes right. It should. As long as I read 2 chapters a night, I think we're done with this. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, in the last 2 chapters, it kind of sounds like it's all over and done with, but I guess it's not, because we still have 6 chapters left to go, I think. So yeah, as far as the deep freeze goes, it was 2 degrees Fahrenheit when I woke up this morning. I don't know what that is in Celsius other than negative something. Negative, anytime it gets near 0 Fahrenheit, it's just cold. And I think we're probably going to be dipping into the negatives at some point this week if it was 2 already. And I think they're saying that the worst day is supposed to either be tomorrow or Thursday. I don't know. We're going to pretend that it's not winter, though, even though it's even winter in this book. Anyway, let's find out how Phileas is going to get himself out of this particular predicament in chapter 31 of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, which is titled, "In which Fix the Detective Considerably Furthers the Interests of Phileas Fogg." Phileas Fogg found himself 20 hours behind time. Passepartout, the involuntary cause of this delay, was desperate. He had ruined his master. At this moment, the detective approached Mr. Fogg and, looking him intently in the face, said, "Seriously, sir, are you in great haste?" "Yes," said Phileas. "I have a purpose in asking," said Fix. "Is it absolutely necessary that you should be in New York on the 11th before 9 o'clock in the evening, the time that the steamer leaves for Liverpool?" It is absolutely necessary." "And if your journey had not been interrupted, you would have reached New York on the morning of the 11th, I take it?" "Yes, with 11 hours to spare before the steamer left." "Good. You are therefore 20 hours behind. 12 from 20 leaves 8. You must regain 8 hours. Do you want to try?" "On foot?" said Mr. Fogg. "No, on a sledge," said Fix. "On a sledge with sails. A man has proposed such a method to me." It was the man who had spoken to Fix during the night, and whose offer he had refused. Phileas Fogg did not reply at once, but Fix, having pointed out the man who was walking up and down in front of the station, Mr. Fogg went up to him. An instant after, Mr. Fogg and this American, whose name was Mudge, entered a hut just below the fort. There, Mr. Fogg examined a curious vehicle, a kind of frame on 2 long beams, a little raised in front like the runners of a sledge, and upon which there was room for 5 or 6 people. A high mast was fixed on the frame, held firmly by metallic lashings, to which was attached a large brigantine sail. The mast held an open stay upon which to hoist a jib sail. Behind that, a sort of rudder served to guide the vehicle. It was, in short, a sledge, rigged like a sloop. During the winter, when the trains are blocked up by the snow, these sledges make extremely rapid journeys across the frozen plains from one station to the next. Provided with more sail than a cutter, and with the wind behind them, they slip over the surface of the prairies with a speed equal, if not better, than that of an express train. Mr. Fogg readily made a bargain with the owner of this land craft. The wind was favorable, being fresh and blowing from the west. The snow had hardened, and Mudge was very confident of being able to transport Mr. Fogg in just a few hours to Omaha. From there, the trains eastward run frequently to Chicago and New York. It was not impossible that the lost time might yet be recovered, and such an opportunity was not to be rejected. Not wishing to expose Aouda to the discomfort of traveling in the open air, Mr. Fogg proposed to leave her with Passepartout at Fort Kearny, the servant taking it upon himself to escort her to Europe by a better route and under more favorable conditions. But Aouda refused to separate from Mr. Fogg, and Passepartout was delighted with this decision, for nothing could induce him to leave his master while Fix was there. It would be difficult to guess the detective's thoughts. Was his conviction shaken by Phileas Fogg's return, or did he still regard him as an exceedingly shrewd rascal who, his journey around the world completed, would think himself absolutely safe in England? Perhaps Fix's opinion of Phileas Fogg had been somewhat modified, but he was nonetheless resolved to do his duty, and to hasten the return of the entire party to England as much as possible. At 8 o'clock, the sledge was ready to start. The passengers took their places on it and wrapped themselves up closely in their traveling cloaks. The two sails were hoisted, and under pressure of the wind, the sledge slid over the hardened snow with a velocity of 40 miles an hour. The distance between Fort Kearny and Omaha, as birds fly, is at most 200 miles. If the wind held, the distance might be traveled in 5 hours, if no accidents happened, and the sledge might reach Omaha by 1 o'clock. What a journey. The travelers, huddled close together, couldn't speak because of the cold, intensified by the speed that they were traveling. The sledge sped on as light as a boat over the waves. When the breeze came, skimming the earth, the entire sledge seemed to be lifted up off the ground by the sails. Mudge, who was at the rudder, kept it in a straight line, and by turn of his hand checked the lurches, which the vehicle had a tendency to do. All the sails were up, and the jib was so arranged as not to screen the brigantine. A topmast was hoisted, and another jib held out to the wind added its force to the rest of the sails. Although the speed could not exactly be estimated, it couldn't have been going less than 40 an hour. "If nothing breaks," said Mudge, "we shall get it there." Mr. Fogg had made it for Mudge's best interest to reach Omaha within the agreed-upon time by the offer of a handsome reward. The prairie, across which the sledge was moving in a straight line, was as flat as a sea. It seemed like a vast frozen lake. The railroad, which ran through this section, ascended from the southwest to the northwest by Great Island, Columbus, a very important Nebraska town, and also Schuyler and Fremont on to Oklahoma, or Omaha. That's a totally different place. It followed through the straight bank of the Platte River. The sledge, shortening this route, took the chord of the arc described by the railway. Mudge was not afraid of being stopped by the Platte River, since that was frozen. So their road then was quite clear of obstacles, and Phileas Fogg had only two things to fear: an accident to the sledge or a calming of the wind. But the breeze, far from lessening its force, blew as if to bend the mast, which, however, the metallic lashings did hold firmly. These lashings, like the chords of a string instrument, resounded as if vibrating by a violin bow. The sledge slid along in the midst of a plaintively intense melody. "These chords give the fifth and the octave," said Mr. Fogg. These were the only words he uttered during the journey. Aouda, cozily packed up in furs and cloaks, was sheltered as much as possible from the attacks of the freezing wind. As for Passepartout, his face was as red as the sun's disk when it sets in the mist, and he laboriously inhaled the bitingly cold air. With his natural buoyancy of spirits, he did begin to hope again, though. They would reach New York on the evening, if not perhaps the morning of the 11th, and there were still some chances that it would be before the steamer left for Liverpool. Passepartout even felt a strong desire to grasp his ally Fix by the hand. He remembered that it was the detective who had procured the sledge, the only means of reaching Omaha in time, but, cautioned by some presentiment, he kept his usual reserve. One thing, however, Passepartout would never forget, and that was the sacrifice that Mr. Fogg had made with no hesitation to rescue him. Mr. Fogg had risked his fortune and his very life. No, Passepartout would never forget that. While each member of the party was absorbed in their thoughts that were so different from each other, the sledge flew fast over the carpet of snow. The creeks it passed over were not even noticed. Fields and streams disappeared under the uniform blanket of white. The plain was absolutely deserted. Between the Union Pacific Road and the branch which unites Kearny with St. Joseph, it formed a great uninhabited island. Neither village, station, or fort appeared on the horizon. From time to time, they sped by some phantom trees whose white skeletons twisted and rattled in the wind. Sometimes flocks of wild birds rose, or bands of gaunt, famished, ferocious wolves ran howling after their sledge. Passepartout, gun in hand, held himself ready to fire on those that came too near. Had an accident then happened to the sledge, the travelers being attacked by these beasts would have been in the most terrible danger, but the sledge held on its even course and soon gained on the wolves, and before long left them howling in a safe distance behind them. Around noon, Mudge perceived by certain landmarks that he was crossing the Platte River. He said nothing, but he felt certain that he was now within 20 miles of Omaha. In less than an hour, he left the rudder and furled the sails, whilst the sledge, carried forward by the impetus the wind had given it, went for half a mile further, with its sails completely unspread. It finally stopped, and Mudge, pointing to a mass of roofs white with snow, said, "We're here." Arrived at the station, which is in daily communication by many trains with the Atlantic seaboard. Passepartout and Fix jumped off, stretched their stiffened limbs, and, aided by Mr. Fogg and the young woman, descended from the sledge. Phileas Fogg generously rewarded Mudge, whose hand Passepartout warmly grasped, and the party directed their steps to the Omaha railway station. The Pacific Railroad proper finds its terminus in this important Nebraska town. Omaha is connected with Chicago by the Chicago and Rock Island Railroad, which runs directly east and passes through 50 stations. There was a train ready to start when Mr. Fogg and his party reached the station, and they only had time to get into their cars. They had seen nothing of Omaha, but Passepartout confessed himself that this was not to be regretted. They were not traveling to see the sights, after all. The train passed quickly across the state of Iowa, by Council Bluffs, Des Moines, and Iowa City. During the night, it crossed the Mississippi at Davenport, and at Rock Island it entered Illinois. The next day, which was the 10th, at 4 in the evening, it reached Chicago, already rising from its ruins and more proudly seated than ever on the borders of beautiful Lake Michigan. There are 900 miles that separate Chicago from New York, but trains are not wanting in Chicago. Mr. Fogg passed at once from one to the other, and the locomotive of the Pittsburgh, Fort Wayne, and Chicago Railway left at full speed, as if it fully comprehended that the gentleman had no time to lose at all. The train they were on traversed Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey in a flash, running through towns with antique names, some of which had streets and car tracks, but no houses yet. At last the Hudson came into view, and at 11:15 on the evening of the 11th, the train stopped in the station on the right bank of the river, in front of the very pier of the Cunard line. The boat, China, bound for Liverpool, had started 3/4 of an hour before they got there. Dun, dun, dun. And that is the end of that chapter. I don't think I've ever heard of people windsurfing across the Great Plains, but I guess in a time before cars, that would be a way to do it. Maybe. Interesting. I might have to look it up and see if that is actually something that people truly did, or if it's just an invention by Mr. Jules Verne. Anyway, I'm going to grab a drink. We're going to do another chapter because we got to see what boat they're going to make. They made it to New York and they made it in time. It sounds like the boat left early. Boo hiss, bad boat. All right, I'll be right back. All right, well, that was another one that kind of left us on a cliffhanger now, wasn't it? I guess it's a good thing we don't have to be on a cliffhanger for more than a couple of seconds. So let's jump right in and read chapter 32 of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, which is titled In Which Phileas Fogg Engages in a Direct Struggle with Bad Fortune. The boat, the China, in leaving, seemed to have carried off Phileas Fogg's last hope. None of the other steamers were able to serve his projects. The Pierre of the French Transatlantic Company, whose admirable steamers are equal to any in speed and comfort, did not leave until the 14th. The Hamburg boats did not go directly to Liverpool or London, but to Havre, and the additional trip from Havre to Southampton would render Phileas Fogg's last efforts of no avail. The Inman steamer did not depart until the next day and could not cross the Atlantic in time to save the wager. Mr. Fogg learned all of this, consulting his Bradshaw, which gave him the daily movements of the transatlantic steamers. Passepartout was crushed. It overwhelmed him to lose the boat by 3/4 of an hour. It was his fault, for instead of helping his master, he had not ceased putting obstacles in the man's path. And when he recalled all the incidents of the tour, or when he counted up the sums expended in pure loss on his account, when he thought of the immense stake added to the heavy charges of this useless journey, it would completely ruin Mr. Fogg, and he overwhelmed himself with bitter self-accusations. Mr. Fogg, though, did not reproach him, and on leaving the Cunard pier, he just said, "We'll consult about what is best to do tomorrow. Come." The party crossed the Hudson in the Jersey ferry boat and drove in a carriage to the St. Nicholas Hotel on Broadway. Rooms were engaged, and the night passed briefly to Phileas Fogg, who slept deeply, but it seemed long to Aouda and the others, whose agitation did not let them rest. The next day was the 12th of December. From 7 in the morning of the 12th to 9:15 on the evening of the 21st, there were 9 days, 13 hours, and 45 minutes. If Phileas Fogg had left on the China, one of the fastest steamers on the Atlantic, he would have reached Liverpool and then London within the agreed upon period. Mr. Fogg left the hotel alone, after giving Passepartout instructions to await his return and to inform Aouda to be ready at a moment's notice. He proceeded to the banks of the Hudson and looked around among the vessels moored or anchored in the river for any that were about to depart. Several had departure signals and were preparing to put to sea at the morning tide, for in this immense, admirable port there is not a day in 100 that vessels do not set out for every quarter of the globe. But they were mostly sailing vessels, which, of course, Phileas Fogg could not make use of. He seemed about to abandon all hope when he spied, anchored at the battery, a cable's length off at most, a trading vessel. It had a screw, it was well shaped, whose funnel, puffing a cloud of smoke, indicated that she was getting ready to leave. Mr. Fogg hailed a boat, got into it, and soon found himself on board the Henrietta, an iron-hulled, wood-built on the top. Iron-hulled and wood-built above. He got onto the deck, and he asked for the captain, who soon presented himself. He was a man of around 50, a sort of sea wolf with big eyes, a complexion of oxidized copper, red hair, a thick neck, and a growling voice. "Captain," said Mr. Fogg. "I'm the captain." "I'm Phileas Fogg of London." "And I'm Andrew Speedy of Cardiff." "You're putting out to sea?" "In an hour." "Where are you headed?"
"Bordeaux."
"Your cargo?"
"No freight. Going in ballast."
"Do you have passengers?"
"No passengers. Never have passengers. They get in the way."
"Is your vessel fast?"
"Between 11 and 12 knots. The Henrietta's well known."
"Will you carry me and 3 other people to Liverpool?"
"Liverpool? Why not China?"
I said Liverpool.
"No."
"No?"
"No, I'm setting out for Bordeaux, and I'm going to Bordeaux."
"Money is no object."
"None."
The captain spoke in a tone which did not admit a reply. "But the owners of the Henrietta," said Phileas Fogg.
"The owners are me. Boat belongs to me."
"I will freight it for you."
"No."
"I will buy it from you."
"No."
Phileas Fogg did not betray the least disappointment, but the situation was grave. It was not at New York, as at Hong Kong, nor with the captain of the Henrietta, as it had been with the captain of the Ticonderoga. Up until this time, money had smoothed away every one of their obstacles, but now money was failing. Still, they must find some way to cross the Atlantic on a boat, unless by balloon, which would have been quite venturesome, besides not being capable of being put into practice. It seemed that Phileas Fogg had an idea, though, for he said to the captain, "Will you carry me to Bordeaux?"
"Not if you even paid me $200.
"I'm offering you 1,000.
A piece?
"A piece."
And there are 4 of you?"
"Yes." Captain Speedy began scratching his head. This was $8,000 to gain, without changing his route at all, for which it was well worth conquering the repugnance that he had for any kind of passenger. Besides, passengers at $2,000 are no longer passengers, they're valuable merchandise.
"I start at 9, said Captain Speedy. "Are you and your party ready?"
"We'll be on board at 9, said Mr. Fogg quite simply. It was at that time 8:30. To disembark from the Henrietta, to jump into a hack, to hurry to St. Nicholas and return with Aouda, Passepartout, and even the inseparable Fix was but the work of a moment, and it was performed by Mr. Fogg with the coolness that never abandoned him. Thus they were on board when the Henrietta made ready to weigh anchor. When Passepartout heard what this last voyage was going to cost, he uttered a prolonged "Oh!" which extended from his vocal gamut. As for Fix, he said to himself that the Bank of England would certainly not come out of this affair well indemnified. When they reached England, even if Mr. Fogg did not throw some handfuls of bank bills into the sea, why, more than £7,000 had already been spent. And that was a very short chapter, but it was the end. So I don't know what £20,000 was in back then money, but even saying that, he's spent almost half of the money in just bribes trying to get around the world. It seems like a losing venture, is what I say. I mean, maybe he's doing it for the love of the game, but it doesn't sound like he's getting anything out of it, except perhaps a wife. I haven't really spoken much about Aouda because she's just not a very fleshed out character, but it does seem like she is very inclined towards Mr. Fix, if for no other reason than he's been throwing money around. Or maybe she's one of those that likes the strong, silent type. That could be it. I don't know. We'll have to see how it all shakes out. But thank you, as always, for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that one. And I will see you tomorrow.